Welcome to Envirian, a fable for conservatives the world over, Part 2, Chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 2, The Meeting. About a month after harvest, Envirian City held their annual harvest feast and festival of lights. The entire island congregated to the city to celebrate. All appeared to be well, except that during the feast, a small group of city folk gathered in a park and complained mightily about the powder used to kill the bugs. They said that they lived mostly on the outskirts of the city near the farms, that every week during spring they had to clean their patios, which had a fine layer of the powdery dust covering their furniture, and that the odor, though faint, was bad. One woman angrily complained that she feared for the health of her children. On days when there was a fine layer of dust on her furniture, she could not let her children play outside. They all agreed that they feared for their children's health. Within a few days, word spread all over Envirian City concerning these fears. Finally, it reached the ears of farmers Jed True and Tommy Bump. And there's a picture of harvested wheat. In order to calm people's fears, True and Bump organized a meeting to take place in Envirian City the first week in September at City Hall, the largest, whitest building in the city. On the day of the meeting, many farmers, ranch owners, and city dignitaries were in attendance, as well as leaders of the faction who had started the rumor that the powder was dangerous to their children's health. Many interested parties in the city also attended, including restaurant owners who had to take greater pains to clean vegetables before cooking them, doctors who had varied opinions, and lawyers who wondered if these complaints against the farmers might sprout some litigious activity. Among the leaders of what was becoming an anti-bug powder movement were environmentalists. Though they really had no indisputable evidence that the bug powder had harmed the environment, or themselves or their children, their growing skepticism and vociferous anger were augmenting fears throughout the city. Bump, a very strong-willed, wealthy, and confident man who owned the largest farm on the island, opened the meeting by requesting a prayer. After the prayer, he began to speak. He expressed his concern that the farmers' solution to the bugs, the powdery earth, had created inconvenience, and even worse, fears among the people of Envirian City. He reassured them that the powder was safe, and then he called his 6 strappingly healthy grown sons to the stage whereon he stood, along with his 10 grandchildren and their very healthy mothers. With his dear wife at his side, Bump said, "These are our very healthy sons and their very healthy and beautiful children. And why is that significant? I will tell you. Because our sons, since they were young, used to play near the veins of yellow powdery earth on the east side of the Bluebell Hills. When they played there, their pant legs, shoes, and socks would be covered in yellow powder. That's how I actually discovered that the powder kills bugs, because wherever we laid their dirty clothes, we always found a dead roach or spider nearby. We began using the powder to kill pests in our vegetable garden when our boys were young. We simply rinse the vegetables before cooking, and look at how healthy my sons are, and my healthy grandchildren. People of Envirian City, you have nothing to be concerned about. This bug powder is safe. This powder is the only reason why we had bumper crops this year of wheat, alfalfa, barley, and many other vegetables and fruits. You all are enjoying that delicious food only because we use this powder to kill those voracious bugs. I will tell you, our crops would have been devastated by these new bugs that we had never before seen on our island. That's why I formed a company to extract the bug powder from my farmland and make it readily available to all. Let's keep Envirian Island the great place to live that it is. I will help you to keep us a great nation." When Bump was ending his speech, the audience appeared to be mollified, as many heads could be seen nodding in agreement. But the skepticism of the environmentalists could not be assuaged, and a few shouted boos from where they stood, even while conservative farmers and ranchers applauded Bump. Next, Jed True stepped up to the podium, and like Bump, he related his experiences, having also used his orange bug powder for many years, even before this bug epidemic took place. He too showed off his 5 beautiful and healthy grown daughters and his 3 healthy grandchildren. "People of Envirian," said True, "my family live in Mariana, our little hamlet near the northern shore of Envirian Island, where the misty river flows to the sea and the red poppy-covered hills hide their orange powdery earth. We too have used this powdery earth since our children were young. As well, my father and grandfather before us used it, and so has our entire little hamlet, which sits against the sea east of the misty river. We have used this bug powder on our crops and in our homes to kill pesky bug intruders that threaten to destroy the tranquility of our family life. As you can see, all my children and grandchildren are healthy and full of life. I assure you, my entire family assures you, and the 30 citizen farmers of our little hamlet assure you that this powdery earth will do the people of Envirian City no harm. We farmers and ranchers realize that it does create some inconvenience for you when you have to clean the dust from your patios and wash your vegetables, but you have no more to fear than that. A few of you who live near the outskirts of the city have complained of a slight odor. Yes, this is from the bug powder, but without it we would have lost part of our crops this year, and next year it will be even more critical should the bug population spread across the island in greater numbers. Be patient, and we will eventually win against this infestation." Again, many citizens nodded their heads in agreement. But suddenly, a woman stormed onto the stage and demanded the podium to argue against the use of the bug powder. True graciously stepped aside as he believed in freedom of speech, and, after all, they were in a public building. The woman began. "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Opal Mienten." Some in the audience chuckled. "I was born a citizen of Envirian, but I've lived most of my life on the continent. I returned to Envirian City earlier this year at the behest of our esteemed President Mayor Bliten. People of Envirian, I've come too far only to see this city be bamboozled by this dumb Bump and his Jed counterpart. Don't listen to their lies or you'll be sorry." The audience gasped at her rudeness, and some booed her, but she kept right on. "We had a bug problem on the continent last year. They used an orange liquid on everything. You can't believe how sick it made our children. Some even watched as their dogs and cats died a slow, debilitating death. What horror! And besides that, this yellow powder downright stinks. I urge you to reconsider. The results of using this powder could be devastating for the people of Envirian Island. The long-term effects are yet unknown. If you'll get behind me, I'll help you fight this scourge being laid upon your families by these unscrupulous farmers who are only doing this for greed. They aren't satisfied with a naturally grown, smaller, reduced harvest. They greedily want it all and don't mind putting your families at risk so they can fill their silos with contaminated grain and fill their pockets with gold," she said. At that, many hoots and hollers of support came from the environmentalist group in the back of the hall, while others laughed Miss Opal Mienten to scorn. Jed True, being the gentleman that he was, quieted the audience as Miss Mienten stepped down from the podium. He even thanked her for her comments before he once again assured the people that they had nothing to fear and could enjoy everything they ate, coming from the farms with gusto. Two of those who were laughing at Mienten the loudest were Boudreaux and Thibodeau, the raging Cajuns. Before Jed True could say another word, Boudreaux jumped up to the podium. "Mes amis, I don't know where this Mademoiselle Opal Mienten is getting her facts. When I first saw that little bug on my wheat, I asked myself what that is. I had no clue what to do." Then Thibodeau, who was right behind Boudreaux, said, "France, that wee little bug got us real scared. All we could see was catastrophe. We asked ourselves what to do. Then along came Jed True. He brought with him that powder. Now, can we praise him a little louder? Can't we all see? He has saved us from that bug so sweet." The crowd of farmers and ranchers began clapping and shouting, "Jed True, Jed True, Jed True." Jed thanked the crowd, then said, "To those who don't know him already, I want to introduce my friend and rancher, Senor Smarto Rodeo. He would like to give you the rancher's point of view on these recent events." Senor Smarto Rodeo, a very handsome man indeed, with a winning smile, stepped toward Jed. They shook hands, then Smarto said, "Thank you, Jed." And turning toward the audience, he said, "Look, I realize some of you may still have concerns about the bug powder that was used this past growing season on the farms and ranches of the countryside. But many of you know me as the owner of one of the most well-known ranches in all of Envirian Island. Our carefully bred and cared-for cattle have produced high-quality meats that are tender and full of that wonderful savory flavor that beef gives to every dish." Many in the audience shouted their approval. "But listen, I can't emphasize enough the concern I felt when last spring I realized that if our alfalfa and barley crops failed due to this bug, we would be wholly dependent on the sometimes sparse grasses available on the Pichoni Plains and competing with other ranchers for those same grasses. Worst of all, our cattle and horses would become thin this coming winter with little alfalfa or barley to feed them. When Jed True and Tommy Bump assured me that this bug powder could save these crops and be safe for the animals, I was all for it, and I have not been disappointed. Our cattle and horses have fed on this treated alfalfa and barley for a few months now, and they will feed this winter, when once again wild grasses are scarce. We have Jed True and Tommy Bump to thank for their quick action in educating the other farmers in the use of this powder. Tommy Bump even created a company to extract and bag the powder from the hillsides of his farmland and make it readily available to our farmers. Let's give them a hand." The audience applauded as Tommy Bump and Jed True took a step forward and tipped their hats. "People of Envirian, let's continue down this path of educating ourselves on these new scientific methods that are safe and effective in eradicating these bugs. These methods are protecting our cattle herds, horses, and our families from want and starvation." With that, Senor Smarto Rodeo stepped down from the podium, and the conservative country folk in the audience erupted in applause. Such a knowledgeable and educated man with all his values in the right place, they thought. Some, though, held back their applause and huddled together around Miss Mienten, who was bending their ears in her errant direction in the back of the meeting hall. Naturally, as one who is a student of politics might expect, the audience that night left the meeting divided along geographical lines. The farmers and ranchers who lived in the hamlets and countryside all approved of the use of the bug powder, while the citizens of Envirian City left feeling skeptical at best and avidly against it at worst. Chapter 3. The President Mayor and his secretary make plans. There was one person who conspicuously was not in attendance that day. His name was Opal Mienten, and he was the mayor of Envirian City and the president of the great nation of Envirian. As president of a nation that was such a happy, productive, and peaceful place, he had so little to do as president that his position also included the responsibilities of mayor of the city, just to give him a little more to be busy about. Opal considered himself a sophisticated, cosmopolitan, and worldly man, whose education and erudite mind far exceeded that of the masses. Most especially, he did not feel it necessary, nor enjoyable, to meet with those conservative cowboy farmers and ranchers about so disgusting a subject as bugs. So he had sent Opal, his new secretary, to the meeting. At his beck and call, she had moved back to the island from the continent 6 months ago. She was his old friend from his university days on the continent, Miss Opal Mienten. Many people on the island still didn't know he had a new secretary, but he knew they would soon find out. He planned on making her a big part of his new campaign to completely discontinue the use of this dangerous bug powder. Actually, he knew that the reason he had so little power, even as president, was because everything was so perfectly tranquil, productive, and abundant on the island that there were no problems for him to solve. How could he become the people's hero when there was no dragon to slay? When he had first heard of the bug infesting the island's wheat, barley, and other crops, he figured that now his day had come. Once the crops were sufficiently destroyed by the bug, he would save the day by importing food from the continent, as well as alfalfa and barley for the cattle and horses. Everyone would be so grateful to him that they wouldn't mind paying the extra taxes it would cost in order to do that. Furthermore, people on the continent would be so happy to have his trade that gifts of gold and silver would most assuredly make him a wealthy man. Something he needed because his taste in clothing and lifestyle far exceeded his current salary. Darn that Tommy Bump and Jed True for ruining his plans this year. But not to be dismayed, he knew that next year could turn out quite different. While he was deep in thought, he looked up to see that Opal had arrived at his door, just recently returned from the meeting that the farmers had held regarding the bug powder. "Well, Opal, nice to see you," he said. "How did the meeting go?" "About as I expected," said Opal. "The farmers Bump and True were quite persuasive, and Rancher Rodeo capped things off very nicely, unfortunately. But I know I've at least got my foot in the door. All the environmentalists are with me on this, of course. So we've made plans to canvass the city with our arguments in tow and knock this baby right out of the park." Good, said President Opal Bliten. "So, did you introduce yourself?" "Yes, I said, 'My name is Opal Mienten, and I'm, Opal, by the way, I've always been curious as to where you obtained your middle name," Opal interrupted. "Oh, it's my mother's maiden name." "What an odd name." "Yeah, there's a family story that dates way back. When people on the continent were first being given a second name or a surname, many people were named after their career or trade or after some personal characteristic. It is said that my 8th great-grandfather was such a liar that they named him, oh darn, I'm a liar." "Oh, wow. His name was Oh Darn too, huh?" Yeah, funny coincidence, huh? So did you tell him about that, dodgy orange bug liquid and the dogs and cats that, died from it? Oh, sure. And that Bump and his cronies are using this bug powder 'cause they're greedy and want to get rich quick? I said it all. Everything we discussed, Opal bragged confidently. Great. Well, it might require a little time to take hold, but this is a good start, concluded the president. Beginning in mid-October, from as far away as the alfalfa farms of Francesi in the north to Sherrytown with its peach orchards in the east, and from the northeastern Kirkland farmlands to the Natalian southlands, farmers everywhere prepared for the winter wheat, alfalfa, and barley planting season. Bump's Bug Powder Company went into full gear, preparing burlap sacks full of the yellow powdery earth so that they were ready should there be a surge in the population of this voracious bug on the winter grain crops. At the same time, Jed True and the citizens of his entire hamlet, Mariana, made many trips to the red poppy hills near the Misty River, bagging the orange powdery earth there, so that the farms on the entire north side of the island would have plenty of bug powder. Everyone chipped in their labor, and they held contests to see who had bagged the most in 1 week. Prizes were given out on the weekend for first, second, and third place. Then that Saturday evening they held a dance in the little hamlet to celebrate the success of their hard work. Watching the fast feet of the buck dancers was the best part of the evening. The farmer with the slipperiest feet was Jewel Kirkland, who could outdance any of the buck dancers by a mile. Time flew, the crops were planted, and Christmas arrived in December, a season the people of Envirian loved. All of Envirian celebrated the birth of baby Jesus with turkey and ham, kumquat pie, and cornbread dressing. The food was plentiful, and the citizens of Envirian Island spread their love for one another with gifts and song and joyous goodwill. But nowhere was the love as great as in the family homes of Tommy Bump, Jed True, and Senor Smarto Rodeo. They felt a particular satisfaction because their hard work and intelligent use of resources found right there on the island were saving their crops and their cattle, saving the farms, and saving the ranches. In January, winter, though usually mild on Envirian Island, set in harder than usual. But the people were warm in their houses, and there were potatoes and grain, apples and pears, ham and beef, chicken and eggs, citrus fruits of all types, and of course, plenty of alfalfa and barley for the cattle and horses. All during that winter, the winter wheat crop was growing and thriving. The wheat mite population, though usually high in winter, was kept in check by the yellow and orange bug powders. A successful winter wheat harvest would come in June if the farmers were diligent in suppressing the ever-threatening infestation with the powders. In late March, Envirian's farmers tilled the fields left fallow, and the spring wheat crop was planted. April blew in with rain, and trade winds from the southwest blew warm air over the island. This warmth and moisture sprouted the spring wheat, but the bugs lay in wait, ready to feed on the cellular sap of the stems and leaves. Unfortunately, they were more numerous than before. That spring, almost every island farm was affected by the mites. As the farmers began again spreading their bug powder, Opal Mienten's crew of environmentalists were busy spreading rumors in the city. They insisted that another season of bug powder exposure would put children and pets at risk. They especially denigrated the orange powder, which they said was too much like the orange liquid that had killed so many pets on the continent. The second week in April, they held a protest in the city square, which put pressure on the city council to make a ruling regarding the use of the bug powder. The City Council met regularly in the City Hall Capitol building, the largest, whitest building in Envirian City, which sat behind the city square on the north side of the city. Because Envirian Nation was small, the City Council also served as the nation's legislature, so it was formally called the City Council Legislature. When Tommy Bump, Jed True, and Senor Smarto Rodeo heard about the protest, they were flabbergasted. Why did these environmentalists insist on calling something dangerous that clearly was not? They held a meeting of their own at Farmer's Pub next door to the City Hall Capitol building at their favorite table, which looked out onto beautiful Nana Bay. To counteract the negativity of the protest, the three planned their strategy that day, which included getting support from some of the island's doctors. This concludes Part 2 of Envirian, a fable for conservatives the world over. Please look for Envirian, Part 3, Chapters 4 through 6. On YouTube, also look for Part 4, Chapters 7 and 8, and Part 5, Chapters 9 and 10, and the conclusion of my story. You may contact Joanna Hurley at joannaforfreedom@gmail.com. That's Joanna, F-O-R, freedom@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.